why were you out there, with such a large number of sailors?
You shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have flirted.
What were you drinking?
Well, what were you wearing? Well, who were you with?
What time was it? And you were still outside?
You shouldn't have worn that.
Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you scream?
Why didn't you have his DNA all on your fingernails when you were scratching him and clawing him?
You must have wanted it to happen.
There's a lot of assumptions about how a quote-unquote typical victim should be acting, either during the assault or after the assault. We assume that they're going to be hysterical, they're going to be crying, they're going to be a mess. If the person who's actually presenting in front of us isn't matching that descriptor, sometimes we have a hard time sort of reconciling, is that really what happened?
There's either kind of this re-experiencing, reliving, which are the flashbacks, the hypervigilance, or there's kind of the numbing.
The drinking, the partying, the cavalier attitude, I'm not going to report it, I don't care, it didn't bother me, it's no big deal.
When you go through a traumatic experience, you often don't remember all the facts right away. You sometimes never remember all the facts. You usually don't remember them in the right order.
I really caution people against being like, oh, well, he or she's not crying, so there's no way they were assaulted.
There's a lot of danger in sort of assuming that there's going to be a stereotypical victim or a stereotypical response. Because not only is that not true, but it also is a barrier for victims to come forward and report.
If you see a survivor smiling one day, that's good. If you see her crying the next day, that's normal.
You're supposed to be tough and you're supposed to suck it up. But no matter how strong you think you are, mentally and emotionally, something that completely breaks you down, and just with the aftermath of it all, it's going to come out in a bad way at some point if you keep it bottled up.
I just thought if I ignored it, it would go away.
Their body knows. Their brain knows, their mind knows, their heart knows, their soul knows that something has happened to them. So as much as they would like to pretend it didn't happen, they can't.
The issue that I see a lot with leadership from any level really is that the victim blaming.
I should have known, or I'm sure I missed something, or did I mislead him? I had on jeans and a t-shirt, so I wasn't dressed provocative.
One of the friends that I went out with, when I told him the next morning what had happened, he actually started texting me back that it was my fault. And the last text that he sent said, "You shouldn't have been drinking that much."
Sexual assault, if not the only crime, it's one of the only crimes where the onus is almost automatically put on the victim.
If you got your car stolen off the street, no one would say it was your fault. Why did you park there? Why didn't you, chain it to something nearby?
We want to delve into their past. We want to see what they had on, what they were drinking, what time it was, what type of person they are. We want to know everything about that victim. And no other crime does this happen.
No one goes out to drink to get raped or sexually assaulted. They go out to have a good time.
It's so scary to come out and say something happened to you. And then for someone you look up to and want to be like, put you down and say, well, you did this and that's what happens when you go out and drink. You should have expected that. It's so heartbreaking and demoralizing.
I can have on the shortest skirts, the lowest cut top. That still doesn't give anybody the right to, approach me in a disrespectful way or sexually assault me.
I think at the time I was thinking I put myself in that situation with the drinking and everything, and not paying attention to my surroundings, not knowing who it was I was hanging out with. But how do you know? How do you know what people are going to do? She made that decision to do that to me. She made it all on her own. So it's not my fault.
You look back and you analyze the situation, you analyze stuff that led up to it, and you start blaming yourself for it, instead of how it is that it's the predator who's at fault for the entire thing.
You can do everything right. You can have a plan. You can have a drive alive card so that you can get home safely if you've been drinking. You can have a buddy with you who's a designated driver. You can surround yourself with friends and go to a safe place. And bad things can still happen. And it's not your fault.
The
offender owns all of the blame, all of the responsibility for their actions.
And the bottom line is the victim is never, ever to blame, ever, ever, in any scenario.
People automatically assume if there's a report of a sexual assault that doesn't ultimately end in a guilty conviction at a courts-martial, then it didn't happen.
FC1 was already saying his own story, telling people I was lying. So I was already getting blamed. Like, what did you do to FC1? How could you do this to FC1?
You overhear rumors that she's a whore. She just wanted to ruin his family. She just wanted to get out of here. She's lying, and that's all I ever heard.
I thought, great, well, if that investigation fails, then everyone's gonna think I was just lying and making a false report.
Unfortunately, a lot of them do result in acquittals because the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, and it's such a high standard. Unfortunately, many of the witnesses that are involved in the court-martial process were either very intoxicated, their memories are a little fuzzy. A lot of time has transpired.
So all these people coming in and talking to me, asking me questions about that night, and normally you don't think to remember every little detail about your weekend. I mean, I couldn't even tell you what I wore last week, let alone small, major details.
The story doesn't match up all the time, and they'll remember something that they didn't remember the previous time they were interviewed or questioned.
They're talking to the police, they're talking to the prosecutors, they're talking to the defense attorneys, they're talking to the judge, to the jury, they're talking to nurse examiners who are going to be questioning them over and over and over and over and over again.
What has historically been viewed as, oh, well, they didn't tell us all those details right away, they were hiding things, they were lying. A lot of that is just a function of how the brain responds and reacts and protects itself and protects the person from what's going on.
Very few victims are going to put themselves through what they will go through to speak out unless something pretty awful has happened to them. The percentage of cases where that's not the case are really relatively small.
They are taking false reports seriously. It's not something that's just overlooked and pushed to the side. NCIS will investigate those false reports if we have them.
If you have a sexual assault victim who reports, by the time it goes to a court-martial, it can be a year, 2 years plus, depending on it.
Going through the Article 32s and the plea agreements and the trials, it was just shy, literally like a month just shy of 2 years, which is half of my Marine Corps career.
And at that point, sometimes a victim having been through what is a very grueling process, the questioning in Article 32, they may say, ooh, I really don't want to do this anymore.
Absolutely taxing, vexing, however you want to describe it, it was to sit in the room feet away from the guy that so wronged me and so impacted my life.
For a lot of victims, who've been working hard and doing a lot of, taking a lot of time and energy to sort of heal, by the time they get to that, year mark or whatever it is, and they say, I really need to just focus on myself right now. I can't be part of this process. So they decline to continue to be part of the process. And at that point, the case falls apart. Well, I think as humans, we can understand why somebody says, after, a year and a half of this, I need to just focus on myself and taking care of myself. But there's this perception of, oh, they got scared because they're going to a court-martial. They think that, they were lying, they were making it up. So that's why they changed their mind about not wanting to go forward.
Whether or not you believe them 100%, I'd like to ask that you respect them. And that in that respect, you help them to reach out to the resources that are there, so that the truth can be sorted out.
The message needs to be conveyed that you're still my shipmate. I'm sorry, that this happened to you, and I truly wish it had not. But as far as our relationship and how we view you, as our shipmate, nothing has changed.
Just be there. Ask if everything's okay. If they're comfortable, you will know. They will open up.
Just be a good friend and be there for them. Make sure that they have what they need.
The better we treat our victims, the better we treat them, the more we believe them, the more
we stop this victim blaming stuff, the more of them that are going to come forward, and then we're going to start pointing out these perpetrators, and then we're really going to start having an impact.